Keanu Reeves was sitting in front of a live audience during a special show. The crowd was excited, waiting to hear his words. Keanu is known as a humble and quiet man, someone who doesn't talk much about his private life. It carried a deep emotion that surprised everyone for the first time. He began softly, "I want to share something about a man I deeply respect. His name was Judge Frank Caprio." The room went silent. People leaned forward to listen. Many knew Judge Caprio as the kind-hearted judge from Providence, Rhode Island, who became famous for showing compassion in his courtroom. But they never expected Keanu Reeves to bring up his name. Keanu's eyes softened as he continued, "It was only once, but that meeting stayed with me forever." The host asked, "How did you meet him?" Keanu smiled gently, remembering, "I was at a small charity event. I wasn't in the best state of mind back then. I was quiet, sitting alone. And then Judge Caprio came over to me, not as a fan, not as someone meeting an actor, but as a human being speaking to another human being." The audience felt the weight of his words. Keanu rarely spoke of his personal struggles, but everyone knew he had gone through loss and sadness in his life. Now, it seemed like he had found comfort in that brief meeting with the judge. He didn't talk about movies. He didn't care about fame. He talked about life, about fairness, and about kindness. "He told me something I never forgot." Keanu's voice paused, almost breaking. He said, "Justice without compassion is only law, but law with compassion becomes humanity." The room filled with silence. Those words, spoken years ago, were now alive again through Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves leaned back in his chair as he told the audience about that night. "It was a simple evening, nothing big," he said. "There weren't many cameras, just people gathered to raise money for children in need. I didn't know anyone there. Honestly, I felt out of place." He explained how he was sitting in a corner, trying to stay quiet. Then Judge Caprio walked into the room. People greeted him warmly. You could feel the respect in the air. But when he came over to me, he didn't look at me like a movie star. He looked at me like I was just a man who needed a friend. Keanu smiled faintly as he remembered. He asked me if I was doing okay. And instead of giving a short, polite answer, I found myself opening up to him. I don't usually do that, but there was something about him, his kindness, his patience, that made me feel safe to speak. The audience listened closely as Keanu described their talk. He told me about his life as a judge. He said that every person who stood in front of him carried a story. Some broke the law because of greed, but many were just struggling poor people, single mothers, immigrants, people trying to survive. He said he never wanted to forget their humanity. Keanu's eyes grew thoughtful. He said something that stayed in my heart forever. When a judge shows compassion, he's not breaking the law. He's honoring it. Because the law was made to protect people, not to destroy them. Keanu paused. The studio audience remained silent, almost holding their breath. I realized, Keanu whispered, that he wasn't just a judge in a courtroom. He was a judge of humanity. And in that short meeting, he gave me something I had been missing at the time: hope. Hope that kindness still mattered. Hope that fairness could still win. The audience clapped softly, touched by his words. Keanu Reeves looked down for a moment before speaking again. His voice was gentle but clear. After that meeting, he said, I started to follow Judge Caprio's work. Like many of you, I watched the videos from his courtroom. At first, I thought they were just interesting clips about unusual cases. But then I realized they were more than that. They were lessons about life. He described one case that touched him deeply. A man came to court because he couldn't pay a small parking fine. He was poor, struggling to feed his children. Instead of scolding him, Judge Caprio listened. He asked about his life, his children, his difficulties. He even encouraged the man to keep fighting, to keep going. Keanu paused, his eyes bright with respect. That was who Judge Caprio was. He didn't just see cases, he saw people, and he treated them with dignity, even if they were guilty of a small mistake. He reminded us that compassion is not weakness, is strength. The audience nodded, many smiling through tears. Keanu continued softly. You know, the world is often harsh. We live in a time where rules are followed without mercy, where money decides everything. But Judge Caprio showed us that even in the system of law, there is room for love. He proved that justice doesn't have to be cold. Justice can be warm, it can heal, and it can lift people up. His voice grew firmer. That is why people all around the world loved him. He wasn't just the judge of providence. He became the world's judge. People from every country, every background, watched him and felt hope again. And I was one of those people. The audience clapped louder this time, moved by Keanu's honesty. Keanu ended the part of his memory with a simple line. He taught me that the smallest act of kindness can be more powerful than the greatest law ever written. Keanu Reeves' expression changed as he spoke. His voice grew quieter, more serious. Some weeks ago, he said slowly, I heard the news that Judge Frank Caprio had passed away. The audience gasped softly. Many already knew, but hearing it in Keanu's voice made it feel heavier. I was at home when I first read the headline, Keanu continued. At first, I didn't want to believe it. Sometimes we think good people will always be here, that they'll keep guiding us forever. But life doesn't work that way. He took a breath, his eyes lowering as if he was reliving the moment. I felt like I had lost a teacher, even though I had only met him once. That one meeting, and everything I learned from him afterward, was enough to change the way I saw the world. And suddenly, he was gone. The room stayed silent, hanging on every word. Keanu's voice trembled slightly. I thought about all the people whose lives he had touched, the poor families who left his courtroom with hope instead of fear, the children who saw a man in power choose kindness over punishment, the millions online who watched his compassion and believed again in humanity. We all lost someone that day. He looked up at the audience, his eyes glistening. The world has many judges, but there was only one judge, Caprio. He was not just a man of law, he was a man of love. The crowd sat quietly, many with tears in their eyes. Keanu took another breath, steadying himself. But I also remembered something else. Judge Caprio once told me, we don't live forever, but our kindness does. And I realized, even though he is gone, his kindness will keep living in every heart he touched. The audience erupted into applause, not loud and wild, but slow and respectful, like a tribute. Keanu Reeves sat quietly for a moment before speaking again. His voice was softer now, almost like he was talking to himself. Judge Caprio once told me, he began, even if you can only help one person, you are already changing the world. Those words, they never left me. The audience leaned in. Keanu continued, I don't usually share these things. I believe that kindness should be silent. We don't need to shout it from the rooftops. But today, I want to tell you something, because it's the right moment." He paused, then said, "After meeting Judge Caprio, I decided to honor his words in my own way. I began quietly funding scholarships for young students who couldn't afford education. Children from poor families, kids who had dreams but no way to reach them. I never put my name on it because it wasn't about me. It was about them." The crowd gasped. Many already knew Keanu was generous, but this was the first time he openly admitted something so personal. "I never told anyone this," Keanu said, with a small smile, "but every time I signed a scholarship form, I remembered Judge Caprio's face. I remembered his belief that compassion is not weakness, it's the strongest form of justice." He looked at the audience, his voice firm now. "Judge Caprio showed me that you don't need to wear a robe or sit in a courtroom to practice justice. You can practice justice in your daily life by being fair, by being kind, by lifting someone who has fallen." The audience applauded warmly, their hearts touched. Keanu nodded slowly. "That was my small tribute to him, a way of saying thank you, a way of carrying his message forward. Because Judge Caprio may not be here anymore, but his legacy, his humanity, lives on in all of us." Keanu Reeves straightened a little in his seat as he spoke again. His eyes carried both sadness and admiration. "Judge Caprio wasn't just a judge for his city," Keanu said softly. "He became something much larger. People around the world watched his courtroom videos. They saw him forgive fines for struggling families, listen patiently to the poor, and even smile at children who appeared before him. He showed the world that the law doesn't have to be cold. The law can care." The audience nodded, many remembering clips they had seen online. "I remember one video," Keanu continued. "A young boy came to court with his mother. They couldn't afford the fine. Judge Caprio didn't embarrass them. He didn't scold them. Instead, he spoke gently, like a grandfather. He even said, 'We're going to let you off today, because sometimes life is hard. But remember to stay strong and do your best.' That boy left the courtroom smiling, not crying, and millions of people who watched it smiled too." Keanu paused, letting the moment sink in. That's why he became known as the world's judge. He didn't just belong to Providence, he belonged to humanity. His courtroom became a classroom for kindness, and the world was his audience. He looked down for a second, then back up. "When I traveled to different countries, I often heard people talk about him. Strangers in faraway places who had never met him still spoke his name with respect. That's rare, very rare, because usually judges are feared, not loved. But Judge Caprio was different. He made people believe that justice could have a heart." The studio clapped warmly. Keanu gave a small smile, "And that," he added, "is why his passing feels so heavy. We didn't just lose a man, we lost a symbol. But the good thing about symbols is they never truly die." The audience erupted into applause, holding on to his words. Keanu Reeves sat silently for a moment, letting the clapping fade away. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost trembling. "You know," he said, "I've played many roles in movies. I've been heroes, fighters, even people who stood up against injustice on screen. But in real life, I've always felt quiet. I've always felt like I could never do enough. And then I met Judge Caprio. The audience leaned closer, sensing something personal was coming. He reminded me, Keanu said, that you don't have to be perfect to make a difference. You just need to care. Even one act of kindness can light up a dark room. His eyes grew misty. When I heard he had passed away, I felt like a part of that light went out. It was as if the world became a little darker. He paused, swallowing hard. But then I thought about what he told me. Our kindness will outlive us. And I realized his light hasn't gone out. It's burning in all of us who believe in compassion. The crowd stayed completely silent. Some people wiped their eyes. Keanu continued. It hurts to know I'll never meet him again, never hear his gentle voice again, but I feel lucky, so lucky that I met him even once, because that one meeting changed the way I looked at people, the way I looked at justice, the way I looked at life. He looked up, his voice steady but emotional. If you ask me who the greatest hero I ever met was, it wasn't in Hollywood. It wasn't in the movies. It was Judge Frank Caprio, a man who sat in a small courtroom and changed the entire world with kindness. The audience clapped, this time louder, not just for Keanu, but for the memory of Judge Caprio. Keanu Reeves took a deep breath before speaking again. His voice had grown steadier, but the emotion in his eyes was still there. I want to say something. To everyone watching, to everyone listening, he began. Judge Caprio may not be with us anymore, but his lessons are still alive, and it's our responsibility to carry them forward. The audience nodded in silence. He taught us that kindness is not a weakness, it's the greatest strength. He showed us that justice should never forget humanity. And he reminded us that no matter how small we think our actions are, they can still change lives. Keanu leaned forward, his hands folded. So today, I'm asking all of you, and I'm asking myself to carry his light. When you see someone struggling, don't turn away. When you have the chance to be kind, don't hesitate. When you face injustice, stand against it, but stand with compassion in your heart. The studio was completely silent, every eye fixed on him. Keanu's voice grew softer. I only met Judge Caprio once, but he made me believe that even the smallest act can matter. And if we all choose to live that way, then his spirit will never die. He will live on through us, through every smile we give, through every helping hand we extend, through every moment we choose fairness over cruelty. He paused, then added, the world lost a judge, but it gained an eternal lesson in love and justice. The audience slowly began to clap, louder and louder, until the room was filled with applause. Some stood to their feet, giving the memory of Judge Caprio the honor he deserved. Keanu gave a small bow of his head, his voice almost a whisper as he ended, "Thank you, Judge, for everything." The cameras caught his expression, sad but full of respect, and the world watching felt the weight of his words. After the applause settled, Keanu Reeves leaned back and spoke once more. His tone was calmer now, filled with reflection. In the days after Judge Caprio's passing, I read stories from people around the world, he said. They weren't famous people. They weren't politicians. They were ordinary men and women. Some said they cried when they heard the news. Others said they had never stepped foot in his courtroom, but his videos gave them hope on their darkest days. The audience listened closely, touched by the thought that one man in a small courtroom could inspire millions. I saw a letter, Keanu continued, written by a young student in another country. She wrote, "I want to study law one day, but not to punish people, to help people, like Judge Caprio did." Imagine that. A girl halfway across the world found her dream because of the kindness of one man she never even met. Keanu's eyes softened. That's what true greatness is. Not power, not money, but the ability to touch lives, to plant seeds of hope that will grow even after you are gone. The audience nodded, many smiling through their tears. Keanu gave a gentle smile himself. I think Judge Caprio's legacy will not just live in his family, his city, or even his country. It will live in every person who chooses to be fair, to be kind, to be human. In that way, he hasn't left us. He's everywhere. In every act of compassion, in every person who decides to be just and merciful at the same time. He paused for a long moment, letting those words sink in. Some people are remembered for what they build. Others are remembered for what they destroy. But Judge Caprio, he will be remembered for what he healed. Broken spirits, broken families, broken hearts. That is why the world will never forget him. The studio gave another round of applause, this one long and strong, as if the entire world was clapping along. The studio had grown quiet again after the applause. Keanu Reeves sat still for a moment, his face calm but filled with emotion. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of truth. "Judge Caprio once told me," Keanu said slowly, "we are all judges in our daily lives. Every day we judge others by how they look, how they act, what they say. But the real test is whether we can judge them with compassion." He let the words rest in the air for a moment. "That's what I want to leave you with tonight," Keanu continued. "Every single one of us has the power to make a choice. We can choose to be harsh, or we can choose to be kind. We can choose to ignore, or we can choose to care. We can choose to turn away from someone's pain, or we can reach out and help. These are the judgments that shape the world." The audience was silent, hanging on to every word. Keanu's eyes grew misty again. "I met Judge Caprio only once, but he gave me a gift more precious than anything money could buy. He gave me faith in people, in justice, in compassion. I want to carry that gift for the rest of my life." His voice lowered. "If you remember one thing from tonight, remember this: you don't need to be a judge to carry justice. You don't need to be rich to give kindness. You don't need to be powerful to change a life. You just need to care." The audience began to clap softly, slowly building louder and louder, until the whole room was on its feet. Keanu bowed his head. His final words, barely above a whisper: "Rest in peace, Judge Frank Caprio. The world will miss you, but it will never forget you." The lights dimmed slightly, and the studio filled with applause, not just for Keanu, but for the legacy of a man whose kindness had touched the world.